How confident are you that you're eating good food? Hello everybody, this is Farmer Pedro here at San Isidore Homestead, and today I'd like to talk to you about food and nutrition and the role that your farmer may play in keeping you healthy. What, you don't know your farmer? Okay, we'll come back to that. So the basic premise here is that in order to be healthy, we have to eat good food. But let's come with a working definition of good food. And good food is food that will provide for our nutritional needs. Our bodies will process that food and will extract from it the nutrients that we need. Another element that good food should contain is the least possible amount of toxic materials or toxins in it. Some degree of toxicity is always going to appear in all, say, fruits and vegetables. And there's multiple reasons for that. One, these might be elements that the plants will produce in order to protect themselves against outside pressure, say, for example, pests or even disease, or because they might, even though those things might be toxic to us, might be beneficial to other animal or plant species. But there are some other elements of toxicity present in plants that comes as residues from chemical pesticides and herbicides and even fertilizers that are added to the plants to grow them. Ideally, good food we could define as food that is high in nutrient density and low in toxicity, right? So in other words, that our bodies can metabolize as much from that food without having to work too hard in getting rid of the things that are toxic. And so I like to unpack these two elements a little more. So let's start with nutrient density and go with the assumption that broccoli is good for you. And actually, I think broccoli is good for you. It has vitamins, it has minerals, it's one of those good vegetables, right? And I like to challenge that claim that broccoli is good for you, not on the basis of its nutritional content, but on the basis that not all broccolis are created equal. Let me explain this. You get a broccoli plant, and when you cut the florets from it, the minute you cut that broccoli plant begins to die. What's happening is that from that point on until you consume that plant has started a process of decay, and that process there's no way to stop it. You might delay it, but there's no way you're going to stop it. Virtually by every hour that goes by, that plant is dying more and more, and as the plant dies, so is its nutritional content. What happens is that when you harvest this broccoli, you put it in a cooler, you have to transport it, and days go by, weeks go by. By the time you get to eat that broccoli, its nutritional density is not as high as it was when it was harvested originally. And this is common sense, right? And if you need an example of this, I will ask you to go into your refrigerator, open the vegetable drawer, and in the back there's that celery that you bought maybe 2-3 weeks ago. Pull it out, and you're gonna see that is all wilted, that is wobbly, that is smelled, and one thing that you and I can agree on is that, well, that thing is probably not as nutritious as it was when you bought it. I'll push that one step further and tell you that it's not as nutritious as it was when it was harvested. The second element has to do with toxicity in our food. And I am particularly interested with harmful chemicals or presence in our food. And so what are these harmful chemicals? We're talking about pesticides and herbicides are used during the growing and sometimes even during the harvested process of a plant. So the question, why do farmers have to use chemicals or harmful chemicals to grow food? And the answer that we get from the industry is that, well, in order to control pests and in order to control disease. But then we should ask, why is pest and disease such a big problem? And the answer to that question has to do not so much with plant vulnerability, but on the state of current agricultural practices. Nowadays, we use chemicals to protect plants, and oftentimes these things are done prophylactically in order to avoid pest infestations or disease. And one of the main reasons why this is the case is that modern agriculture relies on acres and acres and acres of the same crop. So what happens is that when we have a single crop that is cultivated over a large area, all the nutrients are in the ground that the plants need for to grow get depleted very quickly. Plants also have immune systems, and they have particular needs as we do, nutrient needs, and so they're extracting all these things from the ground, right? When we have a big field where the same crop is grown, it causes a deficiency in the soil of some of those basic nutrients. Therefore, plants tend to have weaker immune systems. That makes them more vulnerable to disease and pests. Now, from the pest point of view, when you have one big field that is grown with one single crop, it also allows for the proliferation of particular pests because they find a niche that is relatively safe and big that allows for these pest species to really thrive. And as a result, tremendous pressure is then put upon the plants. So what does industrial agriculture do? We treat this symptom, right? We go for the pest and the chemicals to control these things, but we're not really focusing on the health of the crops themselves. And so what are the alternatives, you would ask, right? And so, or in other words, can we control pest and disease without chemical inputs? And the answer is yes. But it requires a different kind of farming practices. And so this is what farms used to do 100 years ago. We have farms that are diversified. And what that means is that we don't have acres and acres and acres of a single crop. We have small acreage where we have many different crops are grown together. And not only that, we have animal species that are also part of that ecosystem. As a result, we're creating plants are working more harmoniously or symbiotically, if you will, with other plants around them that are being nurtured by soil that is healthy by virtue of, well, first of all, there's not a strong competition for the nutrients that are in the soil according to particular crops. We have some other crops that are actually might be helping replenish what is being needed by other crops. And we also have the animal systems are contributing with manure, pest control, and so on. So with all these elements in place, then what we have is plants that are healthier in that they have a strong immune system. They are more resistant to pest and disease because of their own immune system that is stronger, and they naturally fight external pressures like pests and other diseases. So it seems like the solution to the lack of nutrition and density and the overuse of chemical inputs is very simple. What you need is farms that are diversified farms where a variety of crops are grown together. They're regenerative in the sense that we have animal and plant species are interacting, working along with each other. And so that seems to be the key. And that's something that we seem to have lost track of, because that used to be what farming was like just 100 years ago. Am I specifically talking about organic food? Yes and no. Organic food in the sense that things are grown more naturally, yes. Nowadays, unfortunately, organic food is associated with a regulatory system, and it's a label that is applied to food that is grown on under particular conditions or under particular regulations. So, for example, in organic practices, there are some chemicals that are banned, that cannot be used, and there's some regulation on that. Well, that seems like a step in the right direction. However, one of the things that happens with organic food or certified organic food that could potentially happen, and indeed it does happen, is that it can be applied to large-scale agriculture. And so what we have in some cases is these fairly large farms that will grow one single crop. So we're going back to the idea of monocultures, one single crop. And so in order to deal with issues of pest and disease, in some cases they will rely on the use and often overuse of approved pesticides and herbicides. So we're still getting some of those things, even though they might be organically approved. But what concerns me the most is that sometimes these things are overused. In addition to that, we encounter that in many of these organic farms, especially the large ones, we are still dealing with the issues of shelf life and the food that is not necessarily fresh, because it has to travel long distances before it reaches you, and so that affects negatively the nutritional value of that food. We do have regulatory systems that will tell us the degree of safety of food, or to put it in different words, that the traces of harmful chemicals in food are acceptable and are supposed to be harmless. But that is something that we have to be mindful about, because even though you might get minor traces of chemical pesticides or herbicides, perhaps Roundup is the most infamous of them all, right? Even though you might get food that has minimum traces of that, the way that I perceive this is that, okay, maybe there's a negligible amount that we have present in the food, but if we're constantly eating food that has been blasted with these things, so we are adding slowly to the level of toxicity that our bodies have to deal with. Even though a single broccoli that has been sprayed with whatever chemicals might not kill you, it might be possible that some of those residues your body is going to store, or you're going to have to be putting up with that for an extended period of time. And the more of these things that you keep bringing in, you're essentially harming yourselves without knowing it. And so to me, that is a concern. Maybe that's not the case to you, but to me it is. But even in case when small farms have to deal with issues of pest and disease, the natural approach to dealing with those things seem to play a huge role in those small operations. For example, for pest control, we in our farm rely on the use of row covers. These are very thin fabrics that we can put on top of our crops to prevent pests to come and lay eggs or right out eat the crops. And so it's a very simple strategy to create a barrier between pests and plants, and so therefore you can protect the plant. Similarly, we found a great deal of success by spraying plants with simple things like compost tea, right? So you get a handful of compost, you ferment it in water, and then you water or spray the plants with that. That seems to work wonders in most plants that we grow. And so those are the approaches that we take to controlling or dealing with pests and disease in our farm. The other thing is this, that sometimes, yes, you get something that will infect your plants, say, get a disease or some kind of fungus or so that gets out of control. Small farms are resilient, and so rather than us trying to treat these things prophylactically, we can afford to lose one crop because we have many other crops or many other species are growing that will make up for whatever failed. And so that's a strategy in resilience that works very well in the small-scale farming model. As consumers, we have to take responsibilities for the quality of the food that we eat. Unfortunately, the supermarket or the health stores are not necessarily the places where you can find the best quality food. In order for us to have access to good quality food, we have to do one of two things, or maybe both. One, we grow some of our food ourselves in our backyards or windowsills. There's all sort of possibilities to do that. And the other, we buy the food directly from a small local farmer. It has to be local, because that's the only way you're going to be able to ensure that that food is fresh. If your food comes from 1,000 miles away, time needs to pass in order for that food to reach you, and by the time you get it, it's not going to be as fresh as when it was first harvested. So that's the number one. The second one is you want a small diversified farm, because that's when all the elements seem to be working in a positive way to ensure that you're getting the best possible food. Small local farmers are very passionate about what they do. These are the people that will have open door policies that you can come and visit and see how your food is being grown. These are the people who are really passionate, can tell you exactly how that food has been grown. When you go to the supermarket, no one is going to tell you what the weather was like the day they picked up that broccoli. They're not in that business, but your local farmer is, and is interested in that, and he'll tell you stories about that makes your food not only more enjoyable to the palate, but also to the stories that you can tell about it. It's only at that level that you're gonna be able to find a food that will keep you healthy and stronger. No other ways to do this. You know, people go through tremendous pains trying to find a hairdresser or a dentist or a mechanic, and there's legitimate reasons for that, but we should do the same when it comes to our farmer. That's the food that we eat. We eat it every day, and we need that to stay strong and to be healthy and to be energized. And so we have a responsibility to really go and find the best food that we can. So how do we go about finding a farmer? Glad you ask. I tell you this, the best way to find a farmer, a local farmer, a passionate farmer, a farmer with integrity, is to go to your farmer's market. At the farmer's market, you're gonna find that one person week after week, rain or shine. That person will be there bringing food, because their livelihood depends on this. And they're not only bringing food, they're bringing the best food they produce. These are people who are so incredibly passionate. I can tell you so many great stories, and I can tell you I've been immensely inspired by the stories that I've heard from farmers back in the days when I used to shop at the farmers market. I had many great conversations with those farmers, and some of them were quite inspirational, to the point that one day I took a leap of faith and became a farmer myself. And now I grow this amazing food that every day when I sit at the table with my family to eat it, I get a little glimpse of heaven. My soul rejoices, my heart becomes grateful, and my body gets nourished. It doesn't get any better than that. When you buy food directly from your farmer, you're not only investing in your community, you're actually investing in your health. And so your farmer can be one of your best allies when it comes to your health. We learned this lesson a long time ago as we dealt with some health issues in our family. Here's the story of what happened. I hope you like this video, and if that's the case, please consider hitting the like button or dropping us a comment. We would love to hear from you. I also hope that you come back to see us again. Until then, may God bless you.